The scorching sun beat down on Violet Eastwood's tear-streaked face as the rough wooden auction platform creaked beneath her feet. Her wrists were bound with coarse rope that had rubbed her skin raw, but the pain meant little compared to the humiliation burning inside her. The auctioneer's voice rang across the dusty square of Silver Creek, Montana territory in the summer of 1878, drawing the attention of every man gathered there. "Next up, gentlemen, a fine specimen, young, strong, and pretty enough to warm any man's bed. Bidding starts at $50. Violet struggled against her bonds, her honey-brown hair falling across her face as she tried to hide her tears. Only 3 weeks earlier, she had been traveling west with her elderly uncle, her last living relative. They had been on a stagecoach bound for California when bandits attacked. The driver was shot first, then her uncle when he tried to defend her. Violet had been dragged away, terrified and helpless. Now she stood on that platform, treated like livestock, her life reduced to a price. "55," called a voice from the crowd. "60," shouted another. Her stomach twisted with fear and disgust. She had heard stories of such auctions in remote towns where law was scarce and human life meant little, but she had never imagined she would become the victim of one. 75! A portly man with yellow teeth leered at her. 80! Countered a thin miner whose hungry eyes never left her chest. The auctioneer grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "We've got 80. Do I hear 90? Before another bid could be made, the thunder of hooves split the air. Heads turned as a lone rider approached at a gallop from the edge of town. His chestnut stallion skidded to a halt, dust swirling around them like a storm. The rider dismounted in one smooth motion. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dust-covered black hat pulled low over his eyes. A worn leather vest lay over a faded blue shirt, and chaps covered his denim trousers. A revolver hung low on his hip, and a hunting knife rested at his thigh. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his deep voice sharp and commanding. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Just a sale, mister. Nothing that concerns outsiders." The stranger's blue eyes, clear as a mountain lake, moved slowly from the auctioneer to Violet. He took in her bound wrists, tear-streaked face, and the terror in her eyes. "A sale?" His voice dropped dangerously low as he pushed through the crowd. "Looks to me like you're selling a woman." "She's got no kin, no protection," the auctioneer replied defensively. "Found by Harker's boys after an Indian attack. Better she belongs to someone than starves, isn't it?" The stranger's hand rested lightly on the grip of his revolver. "She belongs only to herself." The 5 words rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Violet felt something stir inside her chest. It was not hope, not yet, but something close enough to make her breathe again. "Listen, stranger," the auctioneer said nervously. "We don't want any trouble. This is how things work out here. Not anymore." The stranger climbed the steps to the platform in 2 long strides. Drawing a knife from his boot, he cut through Violet's bonds with swift precision. Turning to face the crowd, he spoke with quiet authority. "Any man here still thinking of buying this woman will answer to me." A murmur spread through the onlookers. Whatever reputation the stranger carried, it was enough. One by one, the men backed away, muttering under their breath. The auctioneer retreated as well, raising his hands in surrender. The stranger turned back to Violet, his voice gentler now. "What's your name?" "Violet," she whispered, rubbing her chafed wrists. "Violet Eastwood." "I'm Dexter Erickson," he said, removing his hat to reveal dark, slightly wavy hair. "Do you have somewhere safe to go, Miss Eastwood?" Violet shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "They killed my uncle. He was taking me to my cousin in Sacramento, but I don't even know if she's expecting me anymore." Dexter's expression softened. "I've got a small ranch about half a day's ride from here. You can stay there until you figure out what to do next. No strings attached. You'll have your own room with a lock on the door. Violet studied him carefully, searching for any sign of deception. But there was something steady and honest in his gaze that eased her fear. "Why are you helping me, Mr. Erickson?" A shadow crossed his face. "3 years ago, my sister was taken in a raid. By the time I found her," his jaw tightened. "No one should be treated like property, not ever." Violet swallowed hard. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said, glancing around the nearly empty square. "We should leave before some of those men decide they don't like being denied." He helped her onto his horse and mounted behind her. As they rode out of Silver Creek, Violet felt his arm steady around her waist. For the first time in weeks, she felt something she had almost forgotten: safety. "Mr. Erickson," she said softly as the town faded behind them. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "Call me Dex," he replied. "And you don't owe me anything, Miss Eastwood. Some things a man does because they need doing, that's all." As they rode across the rolling Montana prairie, the summer breeze cooled Violet's tear-streaked cheeks. She did not know what fate had planned for her, but for the first time since the attack, she was no longer alone. By the time the sun began to set, they crested a hill overlooking a modest ranch nestled in a green valley. A sturdy log house stood beside a barn and corral, while a narrow creek wound lazily through the land lined with shimmering cottonwood trees. "It's not much," Dex said quietly, "but it's mine." "It's beautiful," Violet replied sincerely, her voice filled with relief and wonder. After weeks of fear and captivity, the peaceful scene before her felt like a promise of safety, a promise of healing, and perhaps, though she scarcely dared to hope, the promise of a new beginning. The peaceful valley wrapped around Violet like a gentle embrace as Dex guided the horse down toward the ranch. The late afternoon sun painted the fields in warm shades of gold, and the soft murmur of the nearby creek soothed the tension still coiled inside her chest. After weeks of fear and captivity, the quiet beauty of the place felt almost unreal. As they approached the yard, a man stepped out from the barn. He was older, with graying hair and a weathered face that spoke of long years spent under the open sky. His sharp eyes softened when he noticed Violet. "That's Samuel," Dex said. "He helps me run the place. He served as a buffalo soldier before he took a bullet to the leg. He's the best hand with horses I've ever seen." Samuel nodded respectfully as Dex dismounted. "No trouble while you were gone, boss," he said, then glanced at Violet without curiosity or judgment. "Welcome, miss." "This is Miss Eastwood," Dex replied. "She'll be staying with us for a while." Samuel simply nodded again and took the reins as Dex helped Violet down. Her legs trembled from exhaustion and the unfamiliar strain of riding, but Dex steadied her with a gentle hand. "Easy," he said softly. "You've had a long day." "A long few weeks," Violet admitted with a faint smile. Inside, the ranch house was simple but tidy. A stone fireplace stood at one end of the main room, and a wooden table occupied the center. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with worn volumes that surprised her. A guitar rested quietly in the corner, and a few framed photographs sat on the mantel, hinting at memories of a life lived with purpose and loss. "You can take my room," Dex said, gesturing down a narrow hallway. "I'll bunk with Samuel in the lean-to outside." "I couldn't possibly—" "You need proper rest," he interrupted gently, "after everything you've been through." Too weary to argue, Violet nodded gratefully. Dex showed her the washroom, explaining that the windmill provided fresh water. Though the water was cold, the thought of washing away the dust and fear of the past weeks nearly brought tears to her eyes. "I'll find you some clean clothes," he added. "They'll be too big, but better than what you've got." After her bath, Violet felt transformed. Wearing one of Dex's oversized flannel shirts and trousers rolled at the ankles, she returned to the kitchen where the comforting smell of bacon and potatoes filled the air. Dex stood at the stove, cooking quietly. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" he asked. "I can't remember," she admitted softly. He placed a full plate before her, and they ate in silence. The simple food tasted better than anything she could recall. When her plate was empty, Dex wordlessly served her more. "Tell me what happened," he said gently. If you're up to it." Violet took a deep breath and told him everything. She spoke of her parents' deaths from influenza, of her uncle's kindness, and of the stagecoach attack that had shattered her world. She described the bandits who had taken her, their cruel leader Barrett, and the terror of knowing she was being kept alive only to be sold. Dex listened without interruption, his jaw tightening as she spoke. When she finished, he reached across the table, briefly covering her hand with his. "He won't come near you again," he said quietly. "I promise." The certainty in his voice brought her unexpected comfort. "How can you be so sure?" "I was a Union cavalry officer," he replied. "I've dealt with worse men than Barrett." "Please call me Violet," she said gently. "After today, I think we're beyond formalities." A small but crooked smile softened his stern features. Violet. That night, lying in Dex's bed, Violet stared at the ceiling, overwhelmed by the unfamiliar freedom surrounding her. For the first time in weeks, she was not bound or guarded. She could rise, walk, or leave if she wished. The simple truth felt almost unreal. She thought of Dex, his quiet strength, his unwavering defense of her, and the kindness in his steady gaze. In a world that had shown her its darkest corners, he was an unexpected light. Morning came with the sound of birdsong instead of harsh voices. Violet woke slowly, her body aching but her spirit lighter. A neatly folded calico dress and undergarments awaited her outside the door, accompanied by a note in rough handwriting. "Borrowed from Mrs. Jenkins. She's happy to help." Dressed in clothes that fit, Violet now felt another piece of her dignity restored. She braided her hair and entered the main room where Samuel greeted her with a nod. "The boss rode out early," he said. "He told you to make yourself at home." "Thank you, Samuel. Is there anything I can do to help?" He studied her thoughtfully. "Reckon you could watch the biscuits while I feed the chickens." By the time Dex returned mid-morning, Violet had helped with breakfast, swept the floors, and hung freshly washed sheets outside. He dismounted and watched her with an unreadable expression. "You don't need to do that," he said. "I know," she replied, pinning the last corner of a sheet. "I want to." And he nodded slowly. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," she said honestly. "Having proper clothes helps." Over the next few days, Violet found comfort in routine. She helped with meals, tended to the house, and spent quiet evenings by the fire listening as Dex read aloud or played soft melodies on his guitar. Samuel's stories of his time with the Buffalo Soldiers filled the room with laughter and awe, slowly replacing the shadows of Violet's past. 4 days after her arrival, Dex announced he needed to ride into Boulder Creek for supplies. "Would you like to come along?" he asked. "Might do you good to see the town." Violet hesitated, fear flickering in her chest, but she knew she could not hide forever. "I'd like that," she said finally. Boulder Creek was everything Dex had promised. Orderly streets, welcoming faces, and a gentle sense of peace. The townspeople greeted Dex warmly, and though they regarded Violet with curiosity, their kindness never faltered. At the general store, Dex introduced her simply as Miss Eastwood, offering no further explanation. Later, seated in the tea shop with a delicate cup of Earl Grey in her hands, Violet felt a quiet sense of normality returning. "You seem different," Dex observed. "More human," she said softly. "Alive," he corrected. Their eyes met, and for a moment something passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. As they rode back toward the ranch that evening, the prairie stretched endlessly before them, glowing beneath the fading light. Violet felt hope stirring within her, fragile but real. She did not know what the future held, but she was no longer afraid to face it. And for the first time since that terrible day in Silver Creek, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps her story was not one of tragedy, but of survival, healing, and the promise of something more. Violet's heart was still light from their visit to Boulder Creek as she rode beside Dex across the open prairie. The sky stretched endlessly above them, painted in soft shades of gold and amber as the sun began its slow descent. For the first time since her captivity, she felt truly alive, as though the weight of fear had finally begun to lift from her shoulders. But that fragile peace shattered in an instant. Dex suddenly pulled his horse to a halt, his posture stiffening as his gaze fixed on the horizon. Violet followed his line of sight and saw it too, a thin, dark column of smoke rising in the distance, directly from the direction of the ranch. "Smoke," Dex said grimly, "from the barn." Without another word, he urged his stallion into a gallop. Violet followed closely behind, her heart pounding in her chest as fear gripped her once more. The wind rushed past them, carrying the sharp scent of burning wood. As they crested the final hill, the terrible truth came into view. The barn was engulfed in flames, fire roaring into the darkening sky. Several riders circled the house below, their presence unmistakable. Dex's expression hardened. "Barrett's men," he muttered. "Stay here. If things go badly, ride back to Boulder Creek and bring the sheriff." "What about Samuel?" Violet asked, her voice trembling. "That's what I intend to find out." Before she could protest, Dex spurred his horse forward, rifle drawn. Violet watched helplessly as he rode toward the outlaws, his figure silhouetted against the burning barn. She knew she should obey him and ride for help, but the thought of leaving him to face danger alone was unbearable. Guided by courage she did not know she possessed, Violet steered her mare along the edge of the property, using the trees for cover. As she neared the house, she spotted Samuel behind the smokehouse, clutching his arm, blood staining his sleeve. "Miss Eastwood," he gasped. "You shouldn't be here. What happened?" "They came looking for you," Samuel said through clenched teeth. "When I refused to tell them where you were, they started shooting." Violet's gaze flicked toward the raging battle unfolding near the barn. Gunshots cracked through the air as Dex fought from behind cover, outnumbered but unyielding. "We have to help him," she said urgently. Samuel nodded weakly. Gun cabinet in the house, kitchen windows unlocked. Violet's hands trembled as she climbed through the window and hurried to the cabinet. Inside, she found a revolver and ammunition. She loaded the weapon with shaking fingers, remembering how her father had once shown her. A floorboard creaked behind her. She spun around to find Barrett standing in the doorway, blood staining his shoulder where Dex's bullet had struck him. His cruel smile sent a chill through her. "Well now," he drawled, "if it isn't my runaway merchandise." "I am not merchandise," Violet said, raising the revolver. He stepped closer, confidence gleaming in his eyes. "Put the gun down, girl. You don't have the stomach to use it." But Violet remembered the humiliation of the auction, the terror of her captivity, and the courage of the man who had risked everything to save her. Steeling herself, she pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, striking Barrett in the leg. He howled in pain, staggering backward. Before he could recover, the back door burst open. Dex stood there, rifle aimed steadily at Barrett. Blood streaked his face, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. "Drop it," he commanded coldly. Barrett hesitated, then let his pistol fall. Together, Dex and Violet bound him securely, and soon the remaining outlaws were subdued. Samuel's wound proved to be only a graze, and though the barn was lost, the ranch still stood. By nightfall, they had delivered Barrett and his men to Sheriff Hollister in Boulder Creek. With their testimonies, justice was certain. As they returned to the ranch the next morning, the smoldering remains of the barn stood as a reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. "We'll rebuild," Dex said quietly. "We?" Violet repeated, her voice soft with meaning. He hesitated, then met her gaze. "If you're willing to stay." "I want to stay," she said gently. "Not just in Boulder Creek, but here with you." Dex's eyes softened with emotion. "I've been alone a long time, Violet, but from the moment I saw you on that platform, everything changed." She stepped closer, her hand resting against his cheek. "You gave me back my life, and my heart belongs with you." He lowered his head, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke of promises yet to come. Their love grew as the seasons turned. The barn was rebuilt, stronger than before, and Violet became the beloved schoolteacher of Boulder Creek. Yet when Barrett was sentenced to hang, she chose not to attend, leaving the past behind her as she rode into the mountains with Dex on the day of the execution. Months later, beside a crystal-clear lake, Dex knelt before her with a simple gold ring. "Violet Eastwood," he said softly, "will you marry me?" Tears of joy filled her eyes. "Yes, yes, I will." They were married on the first snow of winter. The entire town gathered to celebrate. Samuel stood proudly at Dex's side. And as Violet walked down the aisle, she knew she had found her home. Spring brought new life, and with it came their daughter, Hope, a symbol of the future they had built together. The ranch flourished, and so did their family, blessed in time with more children and countless seasons of love and hard-earned happiness. Years later, on the anniversary of the day they met, Dex and Violet sat side by side overlooking their land as the sun dipped below the horizon. "Do you ever regret staying here?" he asked quietly. She smiled, squeezing his hand. "Not for a single moment. This is where we were meant to be." "Dear." As the evening star appeared in the Montana sky, Dex kissed her with the same tenderness as on that snowy night long ago, a love born in darkness, but destined to shine as bright as the stars above. For in the wild, untamed world of the frontier, Violet and Dexter Erickson had discovered what mattered most: the freedom to choose one's own path, the courage to stand for what is right, and the rare blessing of finding the one soul who makes your life complete. And it had all begun with 5 unforgettable words. She belongs only to herself.